The break room was too quiet for 8:15 a.m. That's when everyone heard it. The sound of a clipboard slamming down on the stainless steel counter. "You're too slow," barked Darren Burke, the warehouse floor manager, loud enough for the entire team to hear. His voice bounced off the metal shelves like it belonged in a drill sergeant's mouth, not a logistics supervisor's. Maya Collins barely flinched. She stood there in her orange safety vest, fingers still wrapped around the steaming thermos she'd just refilled. Her shift hadn't even started, but the eyes of every employee in the room followed her, like she was a punching bag with legs. "If you can't keep up," Darren added with a smirk, flipping the clipboard open like he had a termination notice ready to go, "maybe it's time we make some changes." A few coworkers chuckled, not because it was funny, but because that's how power moves in places like these. Mock first, fire second. Maya didn't say a word. She just sipped her coffee, stared straight ahead, and mentally counted down the days. Not until her performance review. Not until her paycheck cleared. But until she could be the one holding the clipboard. Because Darren didn't know what was coming. He didn't know what she had inherited, or who she had inherited it from. He didn't know about the sealed envelope, tucked away in a drawer she hadn't opened in months, or that it had the power to turn this place upside down. But he'd find out when the clipboard came back, and it had his name on it. The hum of conveyor belts echoed through the warehouse like a heartbeat. Steady, loud, impossible to ignore. Maya Collins moved through it with quiet precision. She scanned barcodes, stacked inventory, corrected mislabeled bins, and did it without showmanship. But to her coworkers, that patience wasn't professionalism. It was a punchline. Clock's ticking, Grandma. Darren Burke snorted one morning, tossing boxes like he was on a game show timer. Darren wasn't just a supervisor. He was a showboat. Loud, fast-talking, obsessed with numbers. And he made sure everyone knew who was too slow to keep up. That name, Too Slow, stuck like grease. It showed up on the whiteboard under fake productivity stats. Someone scratched it onto her locker in permanent marker. When she found it, Maya didn't erase it. She wrote down the date and kept writing, because Maya never flinched. Not when they laughed as she pushed heavy pallets solo. Not when they accidentally bumped her cart. Not even when Darren announced a new reward wall, the red board, where the fastest workers got public praise. And the slowest? Public shame. Maya's name hit the red 3 weeks in a row. Darren made it a show. "If this keeps up," he shouted during shift change, waving a clipboard like a baton, "we're going to have to get Maya a desk job counting snails." No one defended her. Not one voice. Just footsteps and chuckles fading down the aisle. That night, in the break room, she sat alone with her dinner and a printed spreadsheet. The top names weren't the fastest, just the loudest. And the ones at the bottom? Always the quiet ones. The thorough ones. People like her. She pulled out her notebook, jotted another line, another date. Because Maya wasn't slow. She was calculating. There's a difference. She knew which scanner logged false errors. She knew which supervisors swapped ID codes on night shifts. And her pen? Not just a pen. It was recording all of it. No one noticed. No one asked questions. No one cared who she was. Or who she came from. But maybe they should have. Because they didn't know about the boots she wore. The ones that used to belong to her late aunt, Evelyn Collins. They didn't know what was waiting in a locked drawer at home. Or what her aunt had left her in a dusty envelope marked, "For Maya, when you know it's time." And when she finally opened that safety deposit box, it didn't hold jewelry. It held permission. It had been nearly 14 months since Maya last visited the law office of Randall and Hines, tucked between a shutter tailor shop and a payday loan center downtown. The lawyer's office still smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper, the kind of place where time moved slower, deliberately. She hadn't planned to return, not until her hands had trembled in the break room last week, holding that spreadsheet like a match over gasoline, inside a locked drawer in her small apartment, behind old tax forms and a chipped ceramic mug from her aunt's retirement party, sat the sealed envelope labeled, "To Maya, when you know it's time." She had found it months ago inside a dusty safety deposit box she hadn't opened in over a year. Her aunt, Evelyn Collins, had been a floor supervisor at Monarch Warehousing for over 20 years before her sudden passing. She'd been respected, even beloved. No one dared call her too slow. But Evelyn never talked about what came after her retirement, only that she'd set things up for the next one in line. Maya had always assumed she meant emotionally, maybe spiritually. But this envelope, heavy, sealed in old wax, said otherwise. The next day, Maya sat across from the same attorney who had handled Evelyn's estate. When she slid the envelope across the desk, his eyebrows lifted. He recognized the seal. "Your aunt was meticulous," he murmured, opening it with care. Inside, with a legal letterhead, a notarized contract, and a signed statement of intent. The documents revealed a quietly negotiated agreement Evelyn had made with the company's founder, Harold Langston himself, during her final years. While the firm had changed hands multiple times since Harold's death, Evelyn had negotiated a stipulation that 2% equity would be held in a dormant trust, reserved for a designated heir of her choosing, should they be an employee of the company for more than 1 calendar year. It was her way of ensuring the company remained grounded, not just in efficiency, but in ethics. And Maya, unbeknownst to anyone, had just hit her 13th month. This equity stake gives you oversight rights, access to internal audits, and, the lawyer said with measured gravity, technically, the authority to request a departmental overhaul, if ethical violations are proven. Maya didn't speak for a long moment. Her hands were clenched, her jaw set. The quiet didn't mean she wasn't angry. It meant the match had touched the fuse. In that moment, Evelyn's words came back to her. Don't fight too soon. Fight smart. Maya hadn't fully understood it back then, but now she did. The warehouse's cruelty, the altered timesheets, Darren's performative speed drills. It all painted a picture, not just of harassment, but of systemic abuse. Maya looked down at the contract again. The paper was dry, but it felt soaked in the weight of something generational. Later, she would say, the paper hadn't changed, but she had. Legacy, yes, but also justice. For the overlooked, the underestimated, the ones told they were too slow, while carrying everyone else's load. Maya left the office with a manila folder in hand, and a storm gathering in her chest. She didn't walk to the bus stop. She walked back to the warehouse, on her day off. No one saw her slip into the back office and retrieve her personnel file. No one noticed when she copied shift logs from the last 6 months. And no one asked why that evening she returned to Randall and Hines with twice as many documents and a single sentence. I'd like to activate my aunt's clause. The lawyer looked at her with quiet approval. Then we'll start with the audit, he said. She nodded once. Step 1, find the cracks. Step 2, tear it down. And just like that, the fuse burned lower. The next Monday began like any other at Monarch's West Line facility. Coffee, clatter, clipped orders from shift supervisors. But under the surface, something had shifted. Maya arrived early, her expression unreadable, her pace deliberate. She wore her regular work jacket, but her satchel was different. Leather-bound, structured, and heavy with paper. No one paid her much mind until 10:02 a.m., when she walked past the warehouse floor and straight into the main office, bypassing the check-in clipboard and knocking just once on the door of Darren's superior, Regional Operations Manager, Terrence Blake. Blake opened the door mid-call, paused when he saw her, and raised a brow. Yes. Maya held up the sealed envelope from Randall and Hines and said only 5 words. You want to read this? That was the moment the mood began to change. Inside the envelope were audit trigger papers, signed and dated, citing Maya's legal right as Evelyn Collins' heir, an equity holder, to initiate a formal ethics review of Westline operations. By 11:20 a.m., HR was looped in. By 1 p.m., 2 company attorneys had joined the call. By 3 p.m., Darren had stopped barking at anyone. The documents included time log discrepancies, verified with time-stamped security footage that contradicted altered records. Maya had spent weeks gathering it quietly. On-camera footage showed several employees forced to clock out early, then continue working unpaid. Others were pressured into skipping breaks, under threat of losing weekend shifts. Maya had audio too, recordings of Darren muttering phrases like, If you can't keep up, maybe you don't belong here. Into walkie-talkies during peak load days. She never interrupted those recordings with her own voice. She just let them play. The evidence wasn't sensational. It was systematic, which made it harder to dismiss. During the internal meeting, Blake shifted in his chair, fingers twitching against the desk, unsure where to look, as Maya laid out shift performance targets that had tripled in 6 months, with no corresponding pay raise. Then came the folder, labeled Evelyn Protocols. Inside were Evelyn's old notes, signed directives about worker dignity, and her reasons for negotiating the clause. She wrote of protecting the soul of a place that forgets how many hearts it takes to keep it beating. By 4 p.m., the lawyers stepped out. Urgent, hushed, avoiding eye contact. Darren avoided eye contact, too, and sat stiffly in the break room, jaw twitching. Whispers had already spread across the floor. People knew something was happening, but no one yet understood just how high it reached. That came the next day, when a company-wide memo was sent at 9:07 a.m. Subject line, West Line Oversight Adjustment. It confirmed that an interim ethics officer had been appointed to oversee West Line operations and staff treatment reviews. Maya Collins, her new position came with authority to approve or veto managerial changes, launch performance reviews, and, most importantly, submit recommendations for structural overhaul. Her supervisor, Regional Director Julian Keene. Darren read it 3 times. Then he marched toward Blake's office, only to find the door shut. Inside, Maya was already on a call. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't gloat, but her tone was clear. If dignity costs too much, we're running the wrong business. And just like that, the warehouse began to shift, not with noise, but with silence, the kind that follows a dropped weight. It didn't take long for the pushback to begin. On the surface, Darren kept things civil. He addressed Maya as ma'am in meetings and didn't bark orders as openly. But beneath that forced politeness was a current of resentment so thick it warped the air. Within a week of Maya's appointment, strange things began to happen. Her locker vanished from the roster. No explanation. Just gone. Her time card mysteriously disappeared from the punch-in board. A maintenance request she submitted was lost in the system, causing a water leak to flood the back hallway. Employees who had once whispered support began avoiding her gaze, clearly afraid to be seen aligning with her. Even shift reports began to omit her name, subtly erasing her contributions. Maya took it all in without flinching. She knew retaliation when she saw it, knew it intimately, the way someone knows the weight of a hammer, by the bruise it leaves. Then came the security incident. A floor supervisor named Mike, Darren's closest ally, accused Maya of breaching protocol by accessing supervisor records. HR was alerted. Cameras were reviewed. The footage? Clear. Maya had been retrieving her own personnel file, within her rights as interim officer. The accusation fell apart fast, but the damage was strategic. It planted doubt. Even Blake began to hesitate when speaking with her, often deferring decisions that had once been hers to make. The audit documents sat untouched on his desk for days. Darren, emboldened by the stall, began whispering that Maya had overstepped, that maybe she tricked old Evelyn into signing that clause. The whispers turned into hallway grumbles. Then came the anonymous email, sent from a company account with no name. It was forwarded to regional headquarters. Subject line, delusional janitor thinks she's in charge. The body included selective screenshots, taken out of context, and a claim that Maya was disrupting morale and creating division. Maya didn't panic. She didn't defend herself. Instead, she requested an open staff forum on record. When the day came, every employee received an invitation. Most expected a messy confrontation. What they got was silence, then slides, then proof. Maya brought receipts, literally, payroll printouts, timestamp audits, Evelyn's original memo, and a record of every retaliatory event since her promotion. She didn't raise her voice. She simply asked questions. How many of you have skipped lunch this year? How many were told they'd be replaced if they filed a complaint? Hands went up. Lots of them. And just like that, the mood turned. Not toward rage, but toward realization. The retaliation had been loud, but now so was the truth. The day of the shift change felt like any other, until it wasn't. Maya arrived 2 hours early, not in her uniform, but in a crisp navy blouse and pressed slacks. The kind of outfit that said, she didn't come to sweep floors today. The clipboard in her hand didn't carry mop schedules anymore. It carried names. By 7 a.m., all the names on the upcoming rotation had been reviewed, flagged, or reassigned. The night crew clocked out, as usual, barely glancing at her as they passed. But the morning crew paused when they saw the bulletin board. There, pinned to the cork, in bold red lettering, was a staffing notice titled, Operational Realignment, Effective Immediately. Beneath it, a list of terminations. Darren's name sat at the top. Mike's right below it. 5 others followed, each one linked to misconduct or active obstruction of Maya's role. Since her appointment, the break room fell silent as word spread. People checked their phones. The company email server had already dispatched the same notice. Maya had sent it 15 minutes prior. Darren stormed in, still wearing his lanyard and a smirk. "You don't have the authority to do this," he barked, voice rising as he crumpled the notice in his fist. Maya didn't look up from her clipboard. "Actually," she said, turning a page. "I do. Page 6, paragraph 3 of the succession protocol. You signed it, remember?" HR had backed her. The moment she presented the full compliance report, Regional had approved. Legal had reviewed. Everything had been airtight. The final approval had come from the board, through a proxy email, with Evelyn's old signature still embedded. Darren turned red. He lunged for the board notice, yanking it down like it could undo what had already been done. 2 security officers stepped forward, not at Maya's request, but at HQ's. "You're trespassing now," one of them said. As he was escorted out, he shouted over his shoulder, "She's just a janitor." Maya didn't flinch. She corrected, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then she addressed the room. "To those staying, you weren't chosen because I like you. You're still here because you do the work, because you don't tear people down to protect yourself. That's the new policy here. No applause, just stillness." Then a slow nod from the warehouse lead. A quiet murmur from the front desk clerk. By the end of the hour, new schedules were printed. Emails were answered. Orders were processed. But something else shifted, too. Something more lasting. For the first time in years, silence didn't mean fear. It meant peace. 6 months later, the old factory didn't just look different. It felt different. The air wasn't thick with tension anymore, and the walls no longer echoed, with condescension disguised as humor. New posters lined the break room, not the hollow motivational kind, but notices about profit-sharing options, skills training, and anonymous feedback lines. Maya now walked the floor, not as a janitor or even a supervisor, but as the newly titled Operations Integrity Officer, a position created specifically at the board's request to ensure no employee would ever be bullied into silence again. Her office was modest but central, glass-walled so no one felt shut out, furnished with 1 desk, 2 chairs, and a single photo on the windowsill. Her father, grinning in his old cleaning apron. She still started each morning with coffee, in the same metal thermos she used as a janitor, and she still remembered which shifts preferred what blend. Some of the same faces remained, like Lucinda from shipping and Reggie from floor maintenance, people who'd treated her like a person, long before the title ever showed up on her badge. And now, there were new faces too, young trainees from the neighborhood, part of the Lift initiative Maya had designed and pitched. Learn, Invest, Flourish, Thrive. A program aimed at giving overlooked youth a fast track into manufacturing careers, with mentorship, training, and real pay. The board had been hesitant at first, but then the quarterly numbers came in. Efficiency had gone up. Turnover had dropped. Even client satisfaction was higher. Because, as Maya once said in her audit report, people work better when they're not afraid. The same clipboard she'd once used to track mops now tracked performance bonuses and pilot projects. Brad's old corner office remained locked, its blinds permanently shut. No one asked when he'd be back. No one needed to. Maya never gloated. She didn't have to. The work spoke loud enough. At a quarterly town hall, the regional VP asked her if she ever imagined she'd be sitting on stage. Maya looked at the room, then at her notes, then back to the crowd. No, she said, voice even. I imagine a workplace where no one had to claw their way out of invisibility. That's what I'm building now. A standing ovation followed, not out of awe, but out of trust, the kind of trust that takes years to earn, and one solid moment to solidify. Later that evening, as she closed her office blinds and turned off the lights, she paused at the door. Her reflection looked tired, but not defeated, just grounded. Purpose wasn't always glamorous. It was often quiet, and so was her final thought before leaving. This wasn't revenge. It was repair. And with that, she stepped out, not into a spotlight, but into a legacy of her own making.